Welcome to Dunamis, where people of faith meet the social and spiritual challenges of the day. Today's topic is addiction and recovery. And our first guest is Ralph Gonzalez, a hypnotherapist and also host of his own show here at Manhattan Neighborhood Network called Positive Power. Ralph, thank you so much for allowing me to interview you on the set of your show. And thank you for just sharing your story with us.
Well, thank you for having me here. And it's funny, the show that you're having is about addiction and recovery. The last show we filmed of Positive Power today is about addiction and recovery.
Great, great. Can you tell me a little bit about your background and what it is you do and how that all ties in with the show?
Well, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I was born in New York City. My first language is Spanish, and I am a hypnotherapist, and my goal in life is to help others and do good. I started at Hackensack University Medical Center, where I would do presentations for the patients, and it had an overwhelming response and contributing to the healing process, and the news came in and did a report on me. I think I have a gift, but the gift stems from knowing what it is to be sick. And what I mean by that is loss of self, no self-esteem, having desperation, feeling like you want to die, actually. I've experienced that, and that has made me be able to help people who are very sick, very ill, emotionally and internally.
Now, in your practice of hypnotherapy, is it strictly with people who have addictions, or is it all sorts of?
Oh, no. It's all sorts. The main ones are high anxiety, high stress, but I also do weight loss, performance improvement to become the best that you can be. And as I mentioned, the best person or the one that I get the most satisfaction is anybody who's broken, who has lost themselves, who has lost their will to live. I understand that firsthand because this is a show about addiction, and I have experienced addiction. But because of that, it has given me the gift to be able to help people.
Oh, great. Well, the show is about addiction, but the primary focus is about faith. So can you tell me a little bit about how your faith journey has evolved through this practice, not only a practice of hypnotherapy, but recovery and addiction and dealing with that?
Well, I got to tell you, faith, God saved my life. Without Him, for me, there wouldn't be a Ralph. There wouldn't be hypnotherapy. And as I said, I want to do good and help others. He has given me this gift. And there was a time that I didn't know if I was going to make it, if I was going to live. It's called a gift of desperation. I had nothing else, no human power, nothing whatsoever. The only person that could help me was God. And He did, and I have a very special relationship with Him. Like for me, God is love, God is fun, and a lot of times like I go to God and I say, hey, how you doing? I may not like that you're doing this, but I understand, so I'm just going to trust you. So faith, wow, faith is the most beautiful thing. And I will tell you something, when negative situations come around, sometimes I have to pray to have faith, because it's okay to be angry with God. It's okay to say, you know what, right now I don't believe in what you're doing, so I pray to have faith.
That's great.
But
I think it's important to be able to recognize that, because a lot of people, when they hit that depth of desperation, they don't have the ability to recognize that they need that to take that step. And I think that's where a lot of people lose their way. Do you find in your practice in hypnotherapy that people are they're either looking for some sort of recovery program, or are they already in a recovery program?
A lot of times what sets the time difference or the beginning of the recovery process is a time before they actually go to recovery. And this time there's a lot of doubt, there's a lot of self-hate, there's a lot of confusion, a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress. I kind of take care of that so that we can take you from the person that believes and wants help to get better.
How does faith work in that process, though? how do you see faith as being an integral part of that healing process? I know that in, like in AA, for instance, there's the higher power, and people are usually encouraged to look to a higher power. Now, I don't know what that involves with your practice, but to what extent do you implement faith in your healing process?
Well, the way I implement it is I pray to God to work through me to help the person. What I do is mostly physiological and psychological, and I work on those aspects. However, if the person has some type of faith, which is very sensitive and very individual, and I have total respect for that element or that part of their life, because it's my profession. And if they happen to bring it up, then I definitely bring in the concept of God. And you mentioned higher power. Actually, with AA, that's one of the first, not requirements, but the first path to a total success of remaining abstinence. Is came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to freedom. So it's a very important part of AA.
And I think also surrender is a very important part too.
Well, surrender is like 100%, because if we try to control our lives, if we try to control the outcomes, we're really going to go crazy, because we cannot control. And to actually to let go and say, let God and not me, gives a sense of freedom, a sense of peace. When you actually let go, when you actually surrender. And yes, you do need to surrender to the aspect that you do have an addiction and that you cannot make it on your own. And your higher power is the one that's going to help you get out of the addiction. So it's surrendering to the concept that I am nothing, I need more. And the terms we're using here may not be so easily interpreted or conveyed. But when I'm saying I am nothing, I am more, I'm talking total desperation, total destruction of self. I mean, it's a place in hell that you actually go to.
I think that's the point when you touched upon earlier about reaching that point of recognition and knowing that you're in a place that you need to take a step in faith towards recovery, or in faith towards relinquishing yourself to a higher power and letting yourself be vulnerable.
Well, just to say that in different terms, to that place where you're totally beat down, where you have no other resources, where you're dead inside, where you know you're going to die, where everything has gone, everything is destroyed. It's called the gift of desperation. When you have that, then you come to a point to total, like, what am I going to do? How am I going to be saved? When you start believing in something higher than yourself, there's hope. And when you start believing in something higher than yourself, you start to see God come in. Because a lot of times you don't need to believe in God, but if you give him the opportunity, there's something in the AA program that they say, get on your knees and pray to whatever. Sometimes people get on their knees and pray to nothing, saying, look, they told me to get on my knees and pray. Let's see what happens. You're opening the door to God, and then God comes to you.
Oh, so do you see a lot of people who are non-believers become believers?
Yeah, I do. I do.
Great.
It's a beautiful program, and it's actually like following steps. Sort of like when you go to school, you need to take pencils and pens, and you need to sit down and you need to follow, listen to the instructions so that you pass. Well, in this case, you need to follow certain steps which require a power greater than yourselves. Get down on your knees is the pencils, and then recovery is you pass. For me, it's God. For me, it's definitely God. I like I said, I have a great relationship. Actually, I feel God here with us today.
Yeah.
You know?
I think for myself, I always look to the life of Jesus because he was a healer. And people equate him to being a philosopher and a prophet, but a lot of times people forget that he was a healer. And of course, you know, they say by his stripes we are healed, that he was crucified for not only our sins, but for our sicknesses. I want to know what it is that inspires your faith the most. Is it something like Jesus? Is it your recovery? What is it about your faith that inspires you the most?
To be able to live happy, joyous, free, and full of positive energy. To be free, to have love, to feel God's love inside of me, to have joy, to be able to have a gift to help people. Oh my God, that is the most beautiful thing, to be able to help people.
I think that's great, because it's actually part of one of the two commandments that Jesus said was to love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and to love others as you would love yourself, and that's to give service also.
Service, it's such an important part of recovery, to help others. And you know, when you do service and you have problems and you start helping other people, your problems totally disappear, because you become involved with another human being and you're doing something
and it
good.
helps you in your own healing process.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I sometimes tell people, help that person, not because you genuinely want to help them, but because you want to help yourself.
And also, people, I heard this from someone, and it resonated me and changed my whole idea about love. And this was at a time when I was doubting my own faith, and they said, you know, love is not just a noun, it's a verb. It's something you do. Even when you don't feel like doing it, you do it, and it gets you in the habit of treating people with respect. And even people that it's sort of like the same principle as when, I don't know if you've heard the principle that when you force yourself to smile, it's like fake it until you make it. You force yourself to smile through a situation, then you actually feel better when you get through the situation, because you've actually accomplished that goal of making it through whatever it is. So it's sort of the same thing. It's faith is putting your trust in a higher power, putting your trust in an ability or a force that is beyond your own capacity to be able to, like, I know I can't do this. But what do you do in your daily routine? What is part of your daily routine? How do you exercise your faith?
Well, I get up, I definitely meditate, I get down on my knees, and I say my favorite prayer, which is, can I say it?
Sure.
God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, so I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, so that victory over them may bear witness to those that will help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. And that I say on my knees. And I say it because I love it, because I have fun with it, and because it makes me feel good. But I also read My Utmost by Oswald Chambers.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, that's a great book. That's a great book.
Devotional.
Yes.
My utmost for his highest. That's
Yes, yes. And then I also read the Bible. And I read it for fun. I read it for enjoyment. I cannot quote anything, but I know what they say, that the Bible speaks to you. Sometimes I have problems, issues. I read something, I'm like, whoa, that's exactly what I was going through, and it provides enlightenment. I read an Amplified Bible that explains exactly what I read, so it really helps me out.
What's interesting is that you can read something that has no meaning and then go back to it 2 or 3 weeks later, and then it totally changes the whole meaning of it. Because of something you're going through, your perception is different. And whether you're going through a challenge that now that verse is addressing your need, that's why they call it a living book. That's why the Bible is called a living book. Do you have a website that we can look at?
Well, actually, yes, it's ralphagonzalez.com. On the services, there's specific information on addiction recovery, and there are a lot of resources there, and there are also some episodes of the previous show.
Oh, great. So when can we expect to see your shows on MNN?
Well, right now you can see the 3 episodes. There's a direct link on the website, ralphagonzalez.com, on the television. This new show is going to be coming out within the next month or 2, and it's about addiction recovery.
So that should be in the fall.
Yeah, in the fall.
Well, great. So thank you so much for joining me today and for allowing me to do this interview. And it's such an important topic. I think everyone needs to really be more open and respectful towards people who are dealing with addiction and with recovery.
Thank you. You're helping people. You're communicating the message. It's been a pleasure, Reed.
Thank you so much. God bless.
God bless you too.
Hi, I'm Michael Reed McGowan, and you're watching Dunamis on Manhattan Neighborhood Network. We're continuing our discussion about faith and recovery. And right now I have another guest, Vanessa Moore, who is a singer, actress, dancer, and a painter. As a matter of fact, one of her paintings is right behind us. So please help me to welcome a quadruple threat, Vanessa Moore. Vanessa, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Reed, for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you do and how you got to this point?
Yeah, right now my main focus is singing. I'm working on an album, a record, and I've actually got 3 records worth of music right now. But what brought me to New York City was ballet. I started off when I was 3, and I left home when I was about 16. I got accepted to the Joffrey Ballet, and that's kind of where I ended up. It's actually where it opened up all the doors for everything else I do right now. I do acting and TV and film and singing mostly. But yeah.
And where are you from?
Colorado.
Colorado.
Yeah.
So what led you here?
Well, I danced from age 3 till just a few years ago. I was accepted, like I said, to the Joffrey Ballet when I was 16, and I came here. It was my first summer, and I was dancing with a summer intensive program. And that summer, one of the ballet teachers sort of put a bug in my ear, and she'd send me off on these auditions. She kind of took me under her wing and paid attention to me. And that summer, I was just going up on all these auditions. I had no idea what they were for. And I go on one, and I end up landing a nationwide Amex commercial, which kind of opened up the doors for TV and film, which is what I've been doing too.
So how, can you explain a little bit about how your recovery came into this, and how your addiction and your faith also, because we want to discuss that.
Yeah.
What was the process?
It was a pretty grueling process, actually. Addiction came later on in my life. You know, I was a very disciplined dancer and very focused on my career for many years from a very young age. I started off, my first addiction, I could say, was an eating disorder when I was 13.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, that came along with ballet. And it ties in very closely to, you know, addiction, because it's the same behaviors, patterns, sneaking. And so around age 13, I started just losing weight. You know, 16 is when it really came on. Wow. And I was very malnourished. And it's kind of one of the things that hindered me from moving forward with my dancing career, although good things happened along the way. My addiction really started with drinking when I was about 20. My body stopped cooperating with me, and I just got very depressed. And although I've always had a strong faith in God, your faith is always tested, even as a Christian. Right. You know, I grew up in the church, and my father was always, you know, harping on me about going, because I was away from home. I was alone in the city, living on my own as a young teenager. And although I knew God was always with me, it was that one piece that I was lacking. I was spiritually, and I realized that later through my addiction when it got really bad, how God tied in with my addiction. Yeah.
Was there a moment of reckoning or an epiphany that you had that was, you know, a catalyst for your?
You know, I went to so many rehabs, and each time I went to rehab, I gained something new, and it wasn't until, you know, I gained you know, a lot of friendships and a lot of clarity and a lot of self-awareness, and little by little I gained more and more faith in the Lord and, you know, in myself. But it wasn't until I had this really crazy experience a couple months ago after my 8th rehab, and it was completely supernatural and spiritual. Wow. And I have to say it's changed my life completely.
Can you describe it?
Yeah, I'm actually working on a documentary on my life right now, and it was going to start off talking about my dancing and my music and a little bit about addiction. Then I had this experience, and it's actually what I'm going to be starting the documentary on now. I was relapsing at a really bad state in my life where it was a good state and a bad state. I was bad, malnourished, and I wasn't eating, and I was burning the candle at both ends. This was only a few months ago, and I was relapsing, and I wasn't eating, and I was working on my music video, and it was a big success, you know, and I was performing in Greenwich, Connecticut on stage. We were opening up for Steely Dan. It was great. It was, you know, a lot of good stuff was happening, but I just got really sick and I relapsed. I was at my friend Teresa's house, who's also in the program, and she also found God through this whole process. And she is a Christian friend of mine, and I'll be talking to her about her, you know, at some point. But I was I just finished my music video, and I was at her place in Queens in Astoria. Actually, I met her in rehab, and one of the funny, I don't believe in coincidences. This is another reason why faith is so amazing. She would see me read my Bible in rehab, and it was the only thing that kept me going at that point because I was so distraught. And to kind of cut forward, we found out that she lives on the same street that I lived in, really right across the street from when I lived in Queens years ago, like 6 years ago. And then we met and we clicked. And when I saw her months after rehab, we meant to keep in touch. I found her at a fashion show. And the first things that came out of her mouth were, "I found Jesus." And we clicked, and we've been friends ever since. So the two of us have been really supporting each other throughout this whole thing. So anyway, I was at her apartment, and I was in a really weakened state. I was probably 98 pounds, and I think everything was shutting down. And I go into her bathroom, and I had to go meet my producer the next morning to finalize stuff on our music video, editing and stuff. So I go into her bathroom, and I turn on the faucet, and I was listening to Karen Carpenter. I was listening to the Carpenters. She's one of my favorite. She's one of my idols since I was little, which is also significant because she had an eating disorder, and I think that she had faith, something would have happened different in her career and her life, but that's a whole other story. So I'm sitting here in my friend's bathroom, and I go into this blackout, this trance, and I could hear Superstar playing, Karen Carpenter's Superstar. And I don't know if I had it listening on the CD player, if it was literally just in the room, but it was playing, and it was going over and over and over in my head. And I black out, and I was vivid. I was awake. I wasn't hallucinating. I wasn't, I wasn't drunk. Nothing. I was completely aware of what was going on. My body just went paralyzed, and I started seeing this galaxy of colors, purples and greens, something that I'd never experienced before in my life, and this warmth that went throughout my body. And I knew it was a touch of heaven. I was in a trance. My friend told me later, and I was there for an hour, receiving these images and these colors and this music. And I was so paralyzed by what was going on, all I could do was make non-committal noises. I'd close my eyes, and God would show me. I'd say, "What's this?" And he'd point, and he'd open up another avenue of color, and galaxy would open up, and I'd give the reassurance that yes, that's what I want to see. And so he'd show me something else, and then I'd point to whatever he'd show me. And it was just these valleys and streams of galaxy and color, and this luminescent bee that was on this kind of iridescent white flower. And the whole time, close Superstar is going on, the song, and I could just feel that everything was going to be okay. It was like a touch of heaven. So I come out of this trance, and immediately my friend's going, "Are you okay in there? Are you okay in there?" And I said, "Teresa, I have to tell you what just happened." And I go into her bedroom, and I told her everything, and she said, "You were in there a long time." And I said, "You have no idea what's happening in there." And she was actually relapsing at that time. God brought us together because she was overdosing on like 20 pills, and her body was fishing out, which means kind of flopping like a fish. And so I have a feeling God led me there that night for both of us, because I woke up that next morning. We had about an hour of sleep, because it was happening throughout the night. And we put on an interview with Jim Caviezel, who played the Passion of the Christ, and Mel Gibson. And I said, "Let's watch something spiritual. We've got to get ourselves connected here." I said, "Let's just make ourselves feel it'll be good for both of us." So I told her everything that happened. And we just lie in bed, and I'm kind of caressing her arm and like trying to keep her calm. And we start watching this interview, and I start receiving the colors again. I start receiving it, and it was only green. And I looked later, and I tried to research all this stuff with a Christian friend of mine who's very gifted. She's a modern-day prophet, I call her, because she speaks in tongue. And I could go on and on, but it's an experience. The point of that, though, is when I came out of that, I woke up and it was like a cleansing had come over me. I knew it was Jesus. I knew it was the Lord saying, "This is me saving you. Get yourself together." The eating disorder, I was ready to get help for it the next day, and I was ready to just come forward with everything. And it was like my black and white world had just turned to color. You know?
Great. Well, I'm so happy. I'm so happy that you're here, and that God is working in your life in this way.
Absolutely.
And you're moving from, like they say, you're moving from glory to glory. You know, and I think it shows, especially with that testimony. It's great.
My biggest mistake I was making, I think, was assuming that only happiness and peace of mind occur when all is well. You know, when there's light at the end of the tunnel. It wasn't until I was in my darkest moments in rehab, I was alone. I brought my Bible because it was all I had. And slowly but surely, I would gain this peace of mind in my darkest moments. And, you know, I just have to say one thing. If I did not have this strong faith in God, I wouldn't even be here talking about all this stuff. I would have nothing. You know, as many times as I fall short and I relapse, I have God to keep me going. You know, it brings me up every time. I can do anything through Christ who strengthens me, you know? And that's people need to know that.
Wow. Well, I'm so glad that you're here and you're sharing all of this with us.
Thank you.
And
I'm so glad to be here.
Yes, and I would love to have you back when your film is out, and we can talk about it some more and your experiences. And thank you so much.
Right,
thank you for joining us on Dunamis again today. See you next time.